I'll let you tell him. He'll tell you his story. But I first met Geoff in the mid-80s, where courts were one of the many organisations that he needed to work with. And Geoff was the coordinator with organ transplants, which was a new initiative. And the process to get everyone on board was massive, and it required huge cultural change. Courts were one of the many organisations that he needed to work with to enable a complex permission process to be attained before the medical teams performed the actual transplant procedures. Enabling this to occur needed a massive culture change, and Geoff's role was to get everyone on board to enable the work to happen. Sounds pretty simple. This national public awareness program included community service announcements, supportive written material, many and varied public speaking events, plus endless face-to-face meetings, including with various court locations, because in the court system, each judicial officer is independent. And so part of the permission process involved coroners who also controlled bodies as well as permission from families. And we had in Victoria, about 50 coroners. So each of them had the ability to say yay or nay in that process. Geoff also targeted students in that process to bring about that reform. So he targeted year 10 and 11 students as a science selective using videos and workbooks. Please welcome Geoff Scully to share his journey with us today.
Hello. Thanks, mate.
I want you to wear that Brownlow medal, mate.
Oh, thanks very much.
And you'll be able to barrack your Collingwood after
Yeah, I just say that. Yeah. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's very nice to be here today. Believe it or not, it's 22 years since I left that job, and I haven't spoken publicly since, other than at our own Probers Club. During the time that I worked in that job, we were the pioneers, I guess, 3 of us in Victoria, probably spoke to about 800 to 1,000 groups, whether they professional or public groups of people. My only contact with the law, and I'll talk about that in a little minute, was the coronial system. And some of you I know are lawyers and retired judiciary. I have a friend, John Butler, some of you may know. He retired as a senior Crown Counsel in the state of Victoria. We grew up as kids together in Pascoe Vale. And I'm very proud to let you know that I've got a granddaughter who's had a very difficult life, who's now doing 4th year law in Bangkok. She won a Colombo scholarship. She's had a tough life, and I guess I should say to you before I start, whilst I don't get into the very, very heavy side of what I did, if you do feel a little uncomfortable and you want to exit, that's fine. I won't be offended, all right? I gave a talk one night down in Ocean Grove and on this topic, and next thing the fellow went down, ambulance comes, and I thought I'd better do the right thing on the way home and call in at Geelong Hospital and see how he was going. Anyway, I walked in and he said, mate, it's all right. He said, it wasn't, he said, I just got a bit overwhelmed by the topic, but he said, I had a bug. So I went into work the next morning. My boss was a professor of medicine, and I told Bob what had happened. He said, I think you'd better give up public speaking. That was pretty early in the piece. I don't know how you publicised this talk this morning, but the topic I headed it, don't take your organs to heaven. Heaven knows we need them here. I saw this slogan in San Francisco back in 1990, and I thought this would be a pretty good thing. It was a bumper sticker, and some of you might have seen it. It was floating around. Anyway, we got it sponsored by the Australian Kidney Foundation at the time, and we ran with it. It was a very simple little slogan, effective, but a long way from the reality of my work. A long way. So how did I get into this job? Well, by absolute fluke. I was a middle-level manager. I didn't have a degree. I don't have a degree. I worked in healthcare indirectly. I was a manager of a private hospital before I took this on, and I'd worked in health insurance. that was my background. I'd always had an peripheral interest in medicine, very peripheral. And anyway, it was 1984, and we're sitting at home one day, and my wife said, "There's a job here for a transplant coordinator at Prince Henry's Hospital. Why don't you apply?" I said, "Oh, don't be silly." I said, "This job will be for a doctor or a nurse." I get an interview. I was working at St V's by this stage, very boring job, very boring, working in the finance department at St Vincent's Hospital. And so I thought, oh well, I'll put in for it. I get an interview. Interviewed by the director, deputy director, nursing manager in a renal unit. I was based in a kidney unit at Prince Henry's. Anyway, I had the interview and I walked out. It was an autumn day and I thought, oh well, they say interviews are good for the soul. Back to the humdrum of work at St V's. And then 6 weeks later, my life did a complete change. I get a call from the deputy director, "Would you like to take on this new position?" "Yeah, I will. I'll do it." It challenged every part of me professionally and personally for the next 16 years. I had no idea what I was getting into. No idea. And there were times where it would have been easy to quit. I'll talk about that later. We had a case that went horribly wrong that finished up in the Health Complaints Tribunal. It was very difficult. A lot of people were backslapping because they knew it could have been them. I'll go through it briefly later with you. Organ donation, not for everyone. Very difficult thing to do for people. Very courageous, very brave. Some of you may have had personal loss involving trauma, and I understand that. And I understand if it is difficult, as I said earlier, if you find this a little tough, by all means leave. There's no problem as far as I'm concerned. It's interesting too, I was thinking actually about doing this talk today. We've had trauma in our own family after I did this job. I saw so much of it. I coordinated 330 cases. That may not sound like a lot to you, but the reality of it all was here in Australia, unlike America, we don't have the road trauma. And well, we had the trauma, but we don't have the shootings. For example, places like New York, Chicago, high donation rates because they have a lot of shootings, deaths, and we didn't see that here. So I could get comfortable and I might go 2 weeks. And I used to look after our unit's budget too. My boss was he saw my administrative background. We had a patient pool, I think at that stage, of about 500 people, and we had a budget of about $8 million. So I looked after all that as well as trying to do this. I also did a year of journalism in 1987 with a few coppers and a few other people, and by the end of the year, my wife said, "Who are you?" The grass was 3 feet long, the kids didn't know me, so I had to give it away. But back to work. I also worked out too that in the first 7 years I worked a year of unpaid overtime. That was okay because we were committed. When we went to America in 1990, our American colleagues were staggered to learn that there was a 54-hour on-call period from Friday night till 8 o'clock Monday morning. We got $37. I laugh about it now. They got $10 an hour US, so they got $540. And we got 37. They would earn, if they had a case, multi-organ donor case, that's heart, lung, liver, kidney donation, they were earning about $2,000 a case because we go to work for a long, long time. Like I'm here today talking to you. This could be a normal day for me. I'd leave, well, eventually it was at Monash, but I could be here talking to you, back to work, get home at 6:30 tonight, go have dinner, go to bed at 10:30, pager goes off. You'd wake up and you think, oh, I hope it's 6 in the morning, it's 11:05. Full on referral, could be, we covered Tasmania as well. I don't know how we did this. I really don't know how we did it for so long, because you've got an army of people now. So, so it could be 11 o'clock and it's a consultant at the Alfred, or it could be a consultant in Burnie, Tasmania. This is a story, road trauma, certified brain dead, family are agreeing to organ donation, put it together. Out of bed you get, if it's local, shave, shower, we used to pride ourselves on being within a city hospital within an hour and a half, physically there. What is it, Monday? So say I go to work now, what is it, 11:15. So I hit Alfred at 12 o'clock, that was one of my hospitals, high trauma rate. I'd be lucky to finish work probably by the wee hours of Wednesday morning. 16 years went boom. I don't know where it went. It just flew. But that's a little bit of the space. So anyway, I got that job, and it was really difficult. Like, I remember they used to have nursing in the hospital, education in the hospital. So here I am, 39 I was when I started this job, and I'm sitting with 20-year-olds doing the renal block at Prince Henry's, and trying to learn all about renal medicine because that's where I was based. And I remember one day my boss, who I had dinner with last week, he's a great guy, he's just retired after 55 years of clinical practice. He said to me, "You better come up." He said, "I'm giving a lecture to these third-year students today." So he said, "Come up, sit in the back, just keep it low key." He gets up on the board at one point, he starts doing this diagram, and in his cultured voice, he said, "Now, anyone like to tell me what that is?" No hands go up. Second time, no hands go up. I've been reading some literature and I thought that's a condition called glomerulonephritis. And he said, "Oh," so I put it up in increments. He said, "Yes, Geoff." I said, "Oh, Professor, would that be?" And the look on his face, you know. So we walked back to the unit, back into his ordinary voice now. He said, "How the bloody hell did you know that?" And I said, "If you throw enough mud at the wall, some of it's got to stick." But they were tremendous guys, you know. They were really good guys, all the physicians. We just celebrated, well, they just celebrated the 50 years anniversary of the renal unit at now Monash Medical Centre. But they were great guys. And when I was out in the field, and there'd be many nights where there'd be some clinical implication regarding the deceased donor that I'd have to seek more advice, and I'd bring them. We all love golf. So Mick said, you know, to follow footy, but I don't follow footy, I'm a real dinosaur here, but I'm bloody sure I follow golf. I know golf, I've played it all my life and I love it. And they all play golf, and a lot of them were members of sandbell courses, so we used to play golf together. But I could ring them, you know, in the middle of the night and say, "Look, can you tell me about da-da-da-da?" And they go, yeah, we'll get them to do this, that, the other. And that's how it was. It was on the job. And they'd ring up at home, a consultant would ring with a referral 3 in the morning, and my wife would say, "Look, just find out what he wants. I'll write that down, you know, get to the hospital, whatever you have to do." So that's a bit of the background. I'm going to do this in 2 parts because I'm going to tell you some of the funniest stuff that happened, which I couldn't talk about when I was employed by the DHS. Right?
Excuse me.
Yes.
Could I ask Bruce, could we have a fractionally more volume, please?
Do you want me to talk up a little bit later? How's that?
That's up to
Geoff, could you perhaps talk more into the microphone?
Yeah, I will.
If possible.
Yeah,
That's going through
upstairs.
Yeah, that's all right. How's that? Can you hear that?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll talk a bit louder.
Thank you.
It's like eating an ice cream. I used to say to some people at our Progress Club, just imagine you're eating ice cream. Anyway, yeah, so apart from 2 social workers, I was the only one that was non-medical in those early days. Never get in today. Never get a look in. With my background, couldn't get there. What happened before we started, it was not structured in any way, shape or form. Organ donors, solid organ donors then were kidney donors. There was no heart, lung, liver donation occurring in those days. And so how it would be coordinated would be the registrar would get called by ICU, and they were what we call non-beating heart donors. So patients whose hearts had stopped beating, they'd get consent from the family, there'd be a quick transfer to theatre. When we started to talk to theatre staff and ICU staff, because we needed their support, we'd often hear, and these are awful words, but they use the term smash and grab. That's what we inherited. When I started to walk out into hospitals, talking to staff, this is who I am, this is what we're going to be doing. They go, oh yeah? You reckon? You think that's good? So the medical profession were 100% supportive. We had to change that, and that took years. It didn't happen overnight. It took a long time for us to do that. The other thing, I think of it too, I mentored a lot of nurses during that 16 years, and a lot of people saw the high flying side of it, like us flying around occasionally in Learjets. We went to Queenstown one night. I've been to Darwin. Very, very, it looked good, but it was pure stress. Pure stress. And I said to them, and I would say it again today, the gold standard for us was that we had to be able to look a family in the eye in the intensive care unit, give them the reassurance that all care and respect was going to be taken with their loved ones, and that they weren't going to be additionally traumatised by the organ retrieval process, and treat these people as you would want your loved ones treated. It wasn't rocket science, but it was gold standard. And you can come out with all the scientific hoo-ha you like. That was the gold standard. Treat them as you would want your own family treated. If I couldn't look them in the eye, and believe me, all of those situations, you're entering a room with people whose lives are never going to be the same again. And we could be there sometimes with them in this tight little room, 3 a.m, 10 people, every word you said they're glued into. So one wrong word from us was one wrong word too many. We were critiqued by everybody that participated in that referral. ICU directors, medical staff, nursing staff, operating theatre staff would all get a survey. So you're a bit like footy. You were only as good as your last case. If I was off the ball, thank God I never got called into DHS. Thank God. Some people did. Some people left very quickly. It would have been very easy. I'll give you an example of how it went. My daughter was 18, and we were shayaking with a car dealer up in Keilor Road. And my pager goes off. I was the duty coordinator for the weekend, and it was an 18-year-old kid, respiratory arrest, secondary to an asthmatic attack. So I had to jump in the car. My car was always filled with my briefcase, my drugs, whatever I had to carry. And by the time I walked through the doors of the ICU, I had to be on my game, because that's the way it was. So it was very easy. The younger ones sometimes found it very tough to do that, and it was tough. And as I said, you were walking on eggshells. Every part of the hospital you worked in. So we realised very quickly that there was a lot of work to do, and our association was called ATCA, the Australian Transplant Coordinators Association. So we had a link with New Zealand as well. We did a lot of bloody good things, I've got to tell you. We did things like we put together a national operating theatre protocol, because we had a mix of skills. We had people that had worked in the operating theatre, so they put that together. We put together a manual for intensive care unit across the country too, a national manual with all the criteria for donation. In that was position statements by various religions, and they said, right, Scully, you're a Mick, you can get out there and talk to these people. Wow, was that interesting? I found myself in these rarefied places. I remember, some of you guys that know David de Kretser, Professor de Kretser. Yeah. Well, he used to work above me in the reproduction unit at Monash, and it'd be good morning, Professor, and it'd be good morning, Geoff, and that'd be about it. Anyway, I didn't know. I organised to get to speak to the Anglican Church people, and he said, I can't remember what his title was, but I found myself at Melbourne Uni, Newman College area, into this big room with all of these senior Anglican people basically putting me under the hammer about our process. I found myself with, so there was the idea of this was, the patient's been certified brain dead, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, the family are Theravadain Buddhist, the consultant would raise the issue of organ donation. They turn around and say to the young registrar, what is the position of the Theravadain Buddhists on the giving and receiving of organs? I don't know. So we had to do that, and we collated that. So I got that Guernsey. We also saw a need to recognise donor families, because without them it didn't happen. So we introduced ecumenical Thanksgiving services every year. I don't know what's going on now, so I'm talking to you from my day. We introduced those. We started to survey them about how they were handled, how they perceived the whole thing, the communication back. And so we very quickly realised that these folk were a little bit different. I mean, death is death, I know, but because these families had donated their loved ones' organs, they would either ring me or call me on the death of their on the anniversary of their loved one. How are they going? Sometimes they died. Had to tell the truth. Sometimes they died. Not every transplant was a success. So we developed a rapport with them. What was particularly comforting was that we followed them through their grieving process. We had to have a good working understanding of grief and its associated responses. We did periodic courses, short course on grief counselling. Not that we were grief counsellors, never went into that field, but we certainly had to understand a lot about it, and I do understand a fair bit about it. So we went back to our people, transplant community, and said, look, we need to provide some sort of counselling for these families that need it. Why are they any different? Of course they're different. Their loved one's heart circulating and, whatever, blah, 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 their kidneys. Of course they're a different group. When someone dies, as we all know, and we've been through this sadness, the staff say goodbye at the door of the ward, they don't see you again. With organ donation, could have been 3, 4, 5 years. I think the good thing for us was we saw them at the most awful time in their lives, and then following them through a period of time where they remarried or had a child. It was very moving. I can remember I had to interview a family at Geelong Private. This young kid, 18-year-old kid, he hung himself using his belt on a fence nearby. It was funny, Mick, because I don't know why, but we had a disproportionate amount of trauma in that Geelong region, and we did a lot of stats, and I could never work out why. But anyway, I walk in this particular night, and you pick things, and sometimes you find out too much before you got there. I'd always pick the brains of the referring consultant, tell me a bit about the family background, and sometimes you hear too much, you think, oh, this may not be right for this family. Well, this particular night, the guy, the son was very sullen. There were problems in the family. There were problems obviously between mum and dad, and anyway, they agreed. I followed them for some time, and they had some counselling. Their marriage, they stayed intact, their marriage. And then they rang me and they were working towards getting recognition for donor families. And would you believe, they were just ordinary, simple folk. They organised a plaque in the Geelong Botanical Gardens. Dennis Walter officiated on the day with his choir. Very moving stuff. They did all this, and that plaque sits in the Geelong Botanical Gardens to this day. But sometime later, I got a phone call, and it almost sort of makes me feel a bit weepy now, to state that the daughter had their first grandchild. And I said, well, how good is that? There's new life in your family. That's the sort of link we had as coordinators. So, you know, it was pretty involved. Just got to forgive this 77-year-old old fella. Well, just to get onto the legal side of it a bit, there were two, as you can see, there were two parts to our job. There was the public education, professional education, but there was also where we earned our dough, as I've always said, the sharp end, that is coordinating the case. So, the Human Tissue Act, I think it's still the same, Mick, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's fairly uniform legislation in all states of Australia. Some subtle variances in it, but it set out very strict guidelines for the retrieving of organs for transplantation. Now, I talked to you about cardiac death before. Back in about 82 or 83, ANZICS, Australian New Zealand Intensive Care Society, came up with brain death criteria. This changed organ transplantation completely. If a patient's certified as brain dead, I'll go into it a little bit. They've got no ability to breathe spontaneously. There are 7 clinical tests that are done to determine that the patient has got irreversible brain damage. And I suppose the thing for lay people, and I was in this position, they disconnect, well, first of all, they have to exclude causes of coma, be they from drug or alcohol ingestion, and an observation for a period of 24 hours. So when those filters are met, there are 7 clinical tests that they would do. Now, the diagnosis of brain death is fairly uniform worldwide, but it was fairly recent, so 83 I think it came in, and these tests are done by 2 clinicians who are clinically independent of each other and not part of the transplant team, which we had to really labour in the public arena. For reasons that I'll go through, there'd be a news item, usually coming out of America. We were asked for our loved one's organs, and here they are today, alive and well. Okay, great for us. I'm about to give a talk to 150 people in Rotary. What had happened, and I can tell you in a relaxed way now, patient's been admitted in a coma to A&E. Not brain dead, not meeting the criteria of brain death, all those filters I told you about. One of them was gag reflex. You disconnect the patient from the ventilator for a period of 5 minutes to making sure that they're adequately pre-oxygenated. If you disconnect them, their carbon dioxide level will build up to a level in a healthy individual and tell you to breathe. In an unhealthy, they can't breathe. Right? That's one. They do cerebral angiography on kids, which I always thought should have been probably done in adult population, and I did raise this a few times with very senior consultants like people up at the Austin and what have you. Why don't you do cerebral angiography? The answer that I kept getting was there's slight variation in the anatomy and structures. So I left it at that. But with kids, unfortunately, I didn't have to go there. That's another story too. I didn't have to work at the kids very often. I think I only worked there 3 times in all those years. But yeah, so it was introduced as another way of diagnosing death in patients that have had catastrophic brain hemorrhage. So all these folk that we saw were either brain hemorrhage, stroke, brain trauma. And I saw some, as you can appreciate, I saw a lot of senseless deaths over those years. I saw somebody who I worked with in a private hospital. Her daughter was killed. She was standing on the corner of the Fitzroy Junction. A boat and trailer became detached from a car and struck Natalie. Fatal head injury. Came time to walk into the unit and talk to the mum and dad. Jenny. And I said, do you want me to excuse myself? No, Geoff, I've known you for years. We went through it. They gave consent. I'm not kidding. The people that did this were so courageous. So courageous. I would be sitting, after I'd done the interview, and I'd be collating medical criteria at the desk. They would say their last goodbye, and I'd think, you'd have to drag me out of here because the deaths were so traumatic, you know, and so sad. And you often saw death might have been the byproduct of a life out of kilter, road trauma. And I remember one night, the family were walking out. As I've walked out here, I've got their son's eskies in 2 kidneys. Mum and Dad had mockies on. They had split up hostilely in the past, and I thought, this young man whose death was road trauma, alcohol related, I thought, he's the byproduct of love they once had for each other. How the hell are they going to cope with their grieving? I can tell you now, through our studies with donor families, that those families that had a strong Christian support system and or a good, strong family system did infinitely better. Folk like these, you just wondered how they got on. But it was the way it was. So there are 4 parts of that, the Human Tissue Act, as far as organ donation goes. This is where you guys probably come into it. So once the patient was certified brain dead, it's a bit of a leap of faith, you know. They had to go, do we raise this with his family or not? Just trying to work out whether they should or they shouldn't. So they did. If they were receptive, they said, we'll get Geoff Scully to come in from the transplant team and talk to you about this. Then we would go through with them in great detail what we were going to do, how we were going to do it. I was there. I was in the operating theatre every case. So I was, you know, I had to give them that reassurance. So we would go through the organs. That's another story. It became a shopping list. It became a shopping list. So we started off with kidney, then we went to heart, lung, and liver. Bob Jones, great guy up the road here, terrific bloke. Spent many nights with Bob. It became a shopping list, and then we were one of 2 units in Australia, and I think still, when I say we, Monash, we did combined kidney pancreas transplants. Only 2, Westmead and us, did them. How am I going for time, guys? All right? All right, yell out if you're from waffling too much. So it became a shopping list. And then somebody comes along and said, look, we need bone. Right. So you imagine we're talking to the family and they said, what organs are you looking for, Geoff? And I'm going, well, it's heart, in my mind, heart, lung, liver, kidney, whatever, you know. So it became a shopping list. That became difficult for us. We used to try and tell them. Some people wanted tissue for research, like there was a guy at Royal Melbourne wanted pancreatic tissue for research. And we had to sort of say, look, you know, you want to come out in the coalface, and it's pretty bloody difficult, this. You know, we're now up to 7 or 8 tissues or organs. Anyway, that's what happened. While I think of this, the coroner's court, I've got to give a quick mention here. Lurch was the boss. What's his name? I've got his name here. I wrote it down. No, David. I know David. David coordinated a funeral, which was a tragic death in Afamo recently. I still know David. He's a neighbour of mine. No, it was the boss was what's his name? Oh, here we go. Stephen Cordner. Good old Stephen Cordner. He used to put the fear of God up everybody. My colleague facilitated the viewing of the skeletal remains of Carmen Chan. Think about that for a minute. I mean, we thought our job was hard. She was a bloody champion, this woman. She facilitated the viewing of Carmen Chan's skeletal remains. It was a tough place, but this is what I wanted to tell you. We had a group called the Melbourne Transplant Group, made up of physicians and surgeons, and we'd have a monthly meeting and we'd rotate them. So the coroner's court said, well, we're in now, we're running a tissue bank, you better come down here and have a meeting down here. I said, okay. And I was the minute secretary, wearing my administrative hat. I had to do every bloody thing. So I got paged, and there would have been, it's in the consulting room down there, there would have been about 12 people, physicians, surgeons in there. I get paged. There was a little hallway outside the door. I walk out, little hallway, and there was a glass door. Here's a photographer photographing a naked woman. I went back in, and I wrote on to my boss was alongside me, and I said, you're not going to believe this. There's a photographer out there, photograph. I don't know what it was. We never found out. I went back to my colleague down at the bank and I said, what was all that about? She said, what are you talking about? She said, I think you might be work stressed. We never found out what that was about, the coroner's court. But we had to liaise with the coroner, of course, and that's where Mick came into the equation. So you got certification of brain death, part 1, written consent from the family, specified organs, coronial approval, of course, and we'd have to go to the coroner. And then finally, the Director of the Medical Services would authorise the removal of the specific organs that we had got consent for. Nothing else would happen. So we had a case, and this is early days. I was going to work and the consultant rang me from our place and said, we've got a patient here who slid a motorcycle under a tram, yada yada, and come up and talk to his family. It was the most difficult case that I ever experienced for the following reasons. I'll try and keep them abbreviated. There was a Catholic priest, and I'm Catholic, so that didn't worry me overly. I was comfortable with him being there, and he'd been providing support in our hospital throughout the night for the family. And it was a lady who had been a renal nurse, who had left the profession and was now working as a carpenter. And I didn't know at this stage that this priest had worn his welcome out. He'd been supporting them, but he'd got to the stage where he'd worn his welcome out. The supporter for the mother of the deceased young man, and this boy was the only joy in her life, I think, from what I can remember. He was the biggest joy, and here he is dead. Her supporter was a Melbourne Age reporter. And at one point in the interview, and I felt genuine empathy for this woman. I had an 18-year-old daughter at the time. And the mother said, when we started talking about particular organs, she said, I don't know that these people appreciate the gift they're given. Internally I've gone, oh my goodness, maybe this is not right for you, but just bear in mind, we've got a healthy 18-year-old, multi-organ donor. I've only been in the job relatively 5 minutes, 3 years, so I'm still learning. And he said, if this family gives consent for organ donation, there won't be any post-mortem. First mistake of mine, I'll go back to it. I'll revisit it a little bit later. I thought, where did he get that? So, we progress a bit further. She gives consent. The case goes ahead. Lots of problems. The living come before the dead. We kept getting back-ended. Theatre time got later and later and later. Anyway, we went to theatre, and some of his organs were retrieved, unfortunately arrested intraoperatively. Anyway, it became a legal case. Now this is where some of you legal people will be interested in this. I only bring it up for this reason. We applied to the coroner verbally for consent for organ donation. The clerk would go back to the coroner, give the coroner the case detail. He would review it, and on that basis the coroner would come back and give his consent. I verbally requested that there be no post-mortem to the clerk down at the coroner's court that night. I know what I did, and I stood up in court and said it. And he denied it. So the case went ahead. The woman found out, the mother found out that her son had had a post-mortem, lodged a complaint with the Health Complaints Tribunal. It ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. In the end, it eventually went to court. I had a call from a solicitor, and he said, representing the hospital, he said there was something like 7 or 8 interrogatories. I'm not familiar with the law, but that's as I understood it. And our main concern all the way through leading up to this was, we didn't want to have any damage done to the program, the transplant program. The woman that was there that night was a journalist for the Age newspaper, and she started to write about it. And she wrote regular articles about our practice. And so when it was about to go to court, we said to the solicitor, we can't defend 1 through 6, but we can defend the other 2. Anyway, the problem was that the coroner denied that they'd got the request. I said to my boss later, it was bloody stressful, because our names are in the paper every other day, and it would have been easy to walk away, but we didn't. I said to my boss, do we have to record these requests when we ring the coronial service? Because I said, I know I rang and requested it. I was fulfilling this woman's wishes. The joy of her life is dead. His response was, how many cases have you been involved in so far? And I said something like, I don't know, 45, 50. And he said, well, really, 1 in 50. I said, but Bob, you're not walking through the hospital every day with everyone looking at you saying, did you screw up? People patting on the back, consultants say, you all right, mate? Yeah, I'm all right. I'm 45 or whatever I was at the time, but it would have been easy to bloody quit. Because, our names are in the paper every other day. So this journalist went to the tribunal hearing, which was supposed to be in Canberra, down at Collins Street, THS, and she wrote about it. Breached the confidentiality thing, wrote about the case. Anyway, the rest is history, but I had to give a talk sometime later, and it was a big critical care forum, 300 registrants. And I said to my wife Maureen, leaving that morning, and I can't think of the topic I was talking on, I said, it just crossed my mind that this woman, I won't mention her name, may be there, and the deceased mother. And sure enough, and some of the footage was graphic, coroners hit and run accident stuff, visual stuff. And anyway, I gave my little talk, and question time. You mismanaged my son's case. To this day, I certainly wasn't confrontational, and I can't remember what I said, but I was the last speaker before morning tea, and I had to pass this lady, and the hatred in her eyes, I'll never forget. And I thought, no matter what we did, we didn't kill her son, but that's how tough it was. So that case settled, and it was get everyone. In the end, it was get my boss, vascular surgeon, get everyone, bang, bang, bang. And we all got a wrap over the knuckles, and I think she got a cash settlement. But so it gives you an idea. It wasn't straightforward by any means. Anyway, I wasn't going to talk about that, but I suppose it is relevant to talk about today. So after we got our act together collectively Australia-wide, we made mistakes. That wasn't one. To this day, it wasn't one. But we were criticised for things like not routinely offering viewing of the loved one post-surgery. And we changed our practice overnight because we were getting canned in the media about it. We took advice from appropriate disciplines about whether we should or we shouldn't. The reality was very few people, if they did have a viewing post-surgery, because they'd gone home, they usually had left the hospital to commence their grieving, and they'd gone home. So very few did, but if they did, it was a very brief, sad, emotional time for them, but we changed our practice. So everything wasn't right from day one, and everyone was, sort of on our backs a little bit, and some of it was justified. So look, as far as the public education side, I suppose this is because of my administration background. It was a great need to do it, and I had the misfortune to interview a young woman at Western General one night whose husband had fallen off a building. She was 7 months pregnant, and we wanted to make 2 commercials, one on the giving of organs for donation and one on receiving. And I rang her and I said, look, have a think about this. Would you be prepared to break your anonymity? This is what we're going to want to do. And I used a little boy who had a kidney transplant on the other side of the equation down at Royal Children's. And we made these 2 commercials. I was able to get the money, I got it funded through philanthropic bequest. And the commercials were made, they were run throughout Australia. They were running as far away as New Zealand and South Africa. And I guess I never kept a lot of this stuff because I didn't think there'd be a life after it, but they'd be as relevant today as they were when we made them. We used an independent film producer. I think we did the whole project for 80 grand. What is interesting when I was thinking about this talk today, I haven't seen anything like it since now. We did that in the 80s, as well as the operational side of our work. I haven't seen anything comparable to that since we had posters in trams, trains, buses, the whole damn thing. Videos. Unfortunately, the only negative on it all was they were called CSAs, Community Service Announcements, and I was supposed to be run through, ABC really. And I'd have to tell you, they got a very ordinary run. And in fact, I rang them a few times and said, come on, you guys, give us a break. We need your help. When we were making a commercial, I remember Shane Warne bowled that magnificent ball around Gadding's legs. And I had this in my head, and I thought, we've got to get Shane Warne into this commercial. And I had, the voiceover was going to be something like, organ donation bowls over many people, and then show the Gadding, whatever. Anyway, we put it to his management team, and they said, nah, don't think it suits our profile. Fair enough, understood all that. Go forward a little bit, and who was the guy that got King hit? One of the other cricketers? Yeah, David Hooks. That's it. David Hooks. God, and I thought, that's what it takes to convert until you get caught up yourself. But anyway, it didn't happen. But that's the sort of stuff that that I got into, as well as running a budget for our patients. So I was a pretty busy boy for a long, long time, and it was great. On the public education side of it, some funny things happened. I travel everywhere. As I said, I reckon I spoke in, I think I did about 800 talks over the years. I never knocked them back. And I remember I went up to Mildura. Mad, I've left Monash and I've got up there, and it was a talk in I don't know, it was a bowling club or something, right? And I want to go to the toilet. I'm bloody tired. I've just virtually driven all the way up from Monash. And I've got in there, and I've just started. No, that's right. There was a heart recipient in the town, and I said, "Look, you kick it off, because I could be 10 minutes late. Whatever, who knows?" So she's up, started. So anyway, I get up there, and I'm really worn out. And I start the talk, and this dear old lady says, "Excuse me, are you going to be very long, because we're going to have lunch in a minute?" And I said, "No, it's fine. It's okay." All good. Did the talk, did the abbreviated talk, jumped in the car, went down the road, although I'm not staying here, jumped out, went down the road, and I think I had my lunch in Irimple or somewhere. But they had no idea. A lot of folk had no idea as to what was going on. I'll tell you one thing that did happen. I got together with 2 amazing people. This guy walked into my office in the 80s at Prince Henry's, off the street, American. His name was Roy Knudsen, and he said, "I want to help you promote transplantation, organ donation." I said, "Okay, here's the story." He lived in Duluth, Minnesota. He's cooking a barbecue one day, and he hears the Amtrak diesel go by. His neighbour had taken his 2 little boys, aged 4 and 6, for a ride on a tricycle. So Roy hears the siren of the ambulance. One of the boys was killed outright. The neighbour was killed outright, and the little boy became an organ donor. His wife Mickey was a physiotherapist, and they were coming to Australia to start a new life. How can I help you promote organ donation? Well, you can imagine, like I was still pretty new, 3 years I suppose, or whatever. Anyway, I took the view that I wasn't going to be an impediment to this guy's grieving. If this was going to help him come out on the public speaking trail, I would do it. I would take him. Now, interestingly enough, he developed a profile nationally. And a lot of the medicos that I work with said, hey, look, you know, how far is this guy out post-death of his loved one? And I said, oh, he's 3 years. They were a bit edgy about it. And I said, look, I'm aware of that. I said, if I feel there's anything wrong, naturally I won't involve him. Anyway, he was a great speaker. We also got a young guy involved who had a heart transplant, who married the nurse that had cared for him in the ICU. It's a lovely story, you know. So out we go. We'd go to a Rotary night. Everyone's happy, you know, you guys, some of you guys have been in Rotary, you know what it's like. You know, we're going to have drinks and dinner and whatever, we've got a guest speaker. We go in and I know we're going to change the mood, you know, of this whole bloody meeting. And, which we did. We did. But it started off I was the nuts and bolts, so I'd kick it off. Roy would tell his heart-wrenching story, tears, little tears everywhere in the audience, and the uplifting Tony transplant. Well, it became very fashionable, I guess, or of interest for Rotary clubs, Lions clubs. That's why we were running all around the bloody country. And also, take your heart, put it into this guy, yada, yada, yada. They wanted to know. They wanted to know the Christian implications, the mechanics of it all, da, da, da. So, the chairman would get up. And he'd have tears in his eyes. Great big 6'4" ruckman for Collingwood. Right? Whatever. And I'd go home and I'd say to Maureen, my wife, I'd say, it's a pity Australia wasn't here tonight. This is the bloody challenge to take our work out of the hospital into the public arena. And that's what happened. Now, the outcome of all of that was, so we spoke in lots of different places around the state of Victoria. Roy committed suicide. He finished up, he got a job on Men's Health, working for, I can talk about these things these days, I couldn't before. He got a job working in Men's Health, committed suicide. Tony died. Tony died. He was 29 when he was transplanted. So he and his wife Tanuna had 2 boys. I've lost contact with all of those folk, of course. It's so long since I worked. They were amazing. Their contribution to the program, not me. I was paid. I was just here. I was a paid professional, I guess you'd call me. I was paid. They were sharing their personal life experience with transplantation. And so I remember clearly Melbourne Rotary, which was how we go for time, Mick.
Yeah, we might have to.
Okay, I'll just go through a couple of little. There's a couple of things I want to tell you about. Oh yeah, when they started doing transplant in Western Australia, there's a guy called Tony House, a professor. I went over there, I had to give a talk. I didn't have a lot of experience in these days, and I had to go around to the ICUs, Royal Perth, whatever, and all these crusty old consultants are in the back of the room, you know. You weren't wondering how the hell's this all going, you know, and I'm telling them what we did, how we did it, and you know, you just never bloody knew what was going on. But Tony said, look, I've got a meeting with the West Australian Health Minister, I want you there. So I found myself, this little black duck from Victoria, I'm sitting with the West Australian Health Minister. Tony was there to get funding for the liver transplant program in WA, which has been going for Yorkers now. For the first time in my life, I said not a single word. I thought, how on earth am I there, sitting here with this esteemed medico, the Minister for Health, but he'd want to be there in case he needed me. Not one word. Corneal transplant. I've got to tell you about this because this is good. How bizarre is this for a job? I'd walk out of our unit at Prince Henry's, down through the lab, down the staircase to the mortuary. Why? because I wanted to see if anyone had died overnight that was suitable as a corneal donor. And I think, what a bloody bizarre job I have got. What a bizarre job. But the reality of life was there were 1,000 people on the corneal waiting transplant list at the time. Now, people had things like bullous keratopathy, very painful conditions. They transplant the cornea, they can read again. Their life is turned around. So, good old me, down the staircase every morning, I'd go into the mortuary. And this particular day, there were 3 deaths overnight in casualty, unusual for a hospital our side. So, ring the consultant, never knew what sort of reaction you're going to get. Hello, it's Geoff Scully, the transplant coordinator. So I'm just ringing about those patients, unfortunately, had a bad night last night. Oh yes, a dreadful night. He said, so busy. So I said, look, all 3 of those folk are potential corneal donors. Oh. I said, do you have any objection to me going back to them now and asking them? No, he said, no. He said, yeah. He said, honestly, he said, we're just taking it. I said, no problem. Caring for the family, what have you. All 3 gave consent. 6 corneal transplants, varying in age from whatever, 20 through 70. Positive stuff. So, positive stuff came out of it all. Terrelgan, one night. This is the stuff I couldn't talk about before, Mick. I had to pick up a vascular surgeon from our group. Gritty guy, not an old guy. He used to speak a bit like that, call me Scully. And I said, look, Terry, we've got to go down to Terrelgan, 63-year-old fellow, kidney retrieval. Yeah, right, pick me up. So I had to pick him up at home. There we go, down to Terrelgan. This is Sunday. So we get down there, do what we had to do. And, there's no registrar. He said, you're going to have to scrub. It's me. You're going to have to scrub, which I did. I also had on that day a pair of pale blue canvas shoes.
Excuse me, you're forgetting to talk to the microphone.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm wandering again. Yeah, that's a bad. I know.
Can't hear a thing.
Okay, I'm back there now. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm a bit of a. Yeah.
You need to stay there.
Yeah, I need to stay there. Thank you.
Okay.
See, I'm still getting told what to do. Anyway, I had to help him out. Right. It's about 10 o'clock at night. He said, where are we going to eat? I said, Terrelgan, not a lot of options, Terry. Not a lot of options, mate. I said, how about McDonald's? Now, I've got to tell you, when I got back into the change room, my canvas shoes were wrecked. Things had seeped through, and we'll leave it at that. So I couldn't use, I had to throw my shoes in the rubbish bin. So we've walked into McDonald's at about 9 o'clock on a Sunday night. Here he is, one of Melbourne's leading vascular surgeons, me, right? No shoes. I said to him, if you gave them 100 guesses, the locals, they'd never pick who we were and what we were there for. That was just the way it was, right?
You look like just one of the locals. I used to live in Latrobe.
Who did?
Me.
Did you really?
Before I went to Geelong.
Anyway, look, I've rabbited it on, so it's time to finish. But I hope I've given you a pretty good idea of what was involved at my level. Any questions?
Yes. What's the most transplanted organ in your time, Geoff? Of all, is it heart, lung, kidney?
The most transplanted was kidney, solid organ. We call them solid organ. When Kerry Packer fell off his polo pony, I'm not kidding, within an hour I had a journalist on the phone. Now, don't ask me how they bloody found out who was who in the zoo. I've had this journo on the phone saying, I believe Mr. Packer's getting a heart transplant. He just donated $3 million to upgrade microambulances in. Well, the reality of that was, and I told him, I said, you're not going to quote me on this, but I said the reality is that a fellow of Kerry Packer's size, and he would have been 110, 120 kilograms, the average donor weight was about 75 kilograms. So they used to work on a variation of plus or minus 10 or 15 kilograms. I said, the reality of life is you wouldn't get a transplant. But that's the sort of stuff that went on all the time. But yeah, a kidney was the most, and still is. But even today, Kevin Rudd infused a lot of money into the program, and look, it's a lot. The resources they've got today are infinitely greater. ICU own this project now, and so they should, because they drive. If they don't refer patients to the transplanters, and I kept telling my people that all over the years, it didn't happen. So that was the reality of it all. But kidney donation was the most common. But the waiting lists today are probably comparable to what they were when I was working all those years ago. Thank you.
Did you ever regret taking on the role?
No. No, it's a good question because, like, personally, as I said earlier, personally and professionally, I grew so much, Mick. I knew this was the bloody challenge of a lifetime, and it certainly was. So I don't regret it. It was the best thing I ever did, and I got into it by accident.
That's fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you.
Geoff, just if I could probably just wrap it up quickly. So 1984 transplant coordinator, new area, 16 years in the role. What you've demonstrated, Geoff, you had a great ability to establish and maintain, manage key stakeholder relationships. You were able to gain their trust, which is instrumental in normalising organ transplants, which today is commonplace and people talk about it. And I remember when Geoff first contacted me when I was at Geelong, when I was the coordinator for Western Districts in those days, and he had to suddenly establish like a relationship with the coroners, and even just commencing a conversation. So it's not like you could tell anyone. It was just getting a conversation happening, and it was interesting. The John Parry Jones, what he was saying about having conversations in New Zealand with the Maoris there. Having a conversation, it's not everyone's cup of tea. So, some people, like in courts, we were tellers. We were used to telling people what they needed to do, make decisions. So this was sort of groundbreaking work, and Geoff was excellent in that role. There wasn't a lot of structure. You had to establish the structure. In courts in that era, Geoff talked about the one incident he had where it was a verbal agreement, verbal approval. That happened all the time in courts. That's how it was run. A lot of the discussions you'd have with senior police, commissioners, deputy commissioners, it was all verbal. You trusted each other, and the vast majority of the time, would you say 1 in 45, whatever it was? I was going to say 1 in 100. You never had an issue, and that was the way the organisation's run. But Geoff, look, being a change agent is always a challenge, but our community have benefited greatly from the work you've done, and I think our community owes you a great debt, and thank you for that, and congratulations on your talk today. Much appreciated. Please accept this as a small token of our appreciation. Geoff's going to stay for lunch, so he's available to have a chat.